Welcome to Under the Microscope. I am your host, Jenny Germano. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Today's topic, building a compliance culture that increases the value of your cannabis business. I thought it was a very timely topic with all the things that are going on in the cannabis industry right now. And before I dive in, a little bit about my background. I got my start working in the cannabis industry in Denver, Colorado in 2009, working in vertically integrated cannabis operations. And in 2015, I founded my company, ICS Consulting, and I help cannabis operators navigate the complex regulatory landscape across the United States. So I just want to thank everyone, to all of our listeners from across the United States and in the international and global markets. I really appreciate you being a part of my audience. So let's get after it. Today, I'm going to be talking about something that every cannabis operator should be thinking about, whether you're planning to grow your business or start your business or launch into a new market or expand into a new state or eventually sell your company. There's some things that you should be thinking about and how to increase the value of your business. Maybe you're looking to expand into some new markets and you're going to have to take on some investors. Maybe you're somebody in Colorado and you're ready to tap out and sell your company, or you're in one of these mature markets and you're ready to sell your business. So we're going to be talking about building this compliance first culture. And for years, compliance has been something that you do because the regulators require it. And we often see this something that slowed operations down, but that's no longer the case. Today, compliance has become one of the biggest drivers in operational excellence, as well as investor confidence and ultimately the business valuation. And I'm going to break into those sections to talk about it. The companies that will win over the next decade aren't necessarily the biggest cultivators or retailers or the MSOs. They're going to be businesses that continually and consistently prove that they know exactly what's happening inside their operation every single day. Every single day. So today I'm going to discuss why compliance has become the competitive advantage and how to build a compliance culture and why buyers or investors will be paying attention to this. And for anyone who's followed me over the years, whether you saw me give a speech somewhere across the United States over the last decade or have been tuning into my podcast, I'm always talking about creating that culture of compliance. And culture of compliance is more than checklists. It's more than inspections. It's really something that is infiltrated into every aspect of the business. For those who follow me, I spend time putting together these long outlines, but I think it's important because I want to make sure I cover everything that I believe that matters. So the first section I want to address is that compliance isn't just about passing inspections. So one of the biggest misconceptions, as I hear about, is that compliance only matters when the regulators come in the door. Whether that's your fire inspection or the health department coming in or the state regulator that's going to come in and inspect you to make sure you're following all the cannabis regulations in your business, or maybe it's the local municipality, like your licensing department. It really depends on what state. A reminder that we are siloed here in the United States and we are not federally regulated. We are regulated individually by the states across the United States market. And not every state has legal cannabis or adult use or medical. In some states, they might have medical cannabis, but it's a very light version of it. And so this is something that's continuing to progress every year here in the United States. We're siloed, which then means the state and the local towns or municipalities are creating their own set of regulations to regulate cannabis operators with. Inspections, yes, 100% important. It's really important for the accountability aspect, but it's more than just inspections. If your standards in your business is that it's just about inspections, you're already behind. That's a very outdated approach. Inspections are just snapshots of what's going on in your business and what regulators and increasingly investors and maybe potential buyers, they want to see consistency. When I conduct audits, I'm not looking for whether somebody cleaned up their facility. I'm looking at the systems that they have in place. Do they consistently produce compliant outcomes? And a couple things that you've heard me talk about on my podcast is risk exposure, and that someone can have a very tiny risk exposure, but that risk exposure can expand. And I like to call it the circle of risk because it's easier to visualize. So you have a tiny circle versus a circle that expands, it gets larger and larger. And you can look at your risk as a circle and how big is that circle of risk in your business. And that's what investors are going to look at. They're going to look at your risk tolerance. They're going to look at reputational risk. And I love that saying reputational risk comes from the banking industry, but I think it definitely applies very well here into the cannabis industry for cannabis operators, because reputational risk can be tied to recalls, issues with the brand, inconsistency with your brand, inconsistent experience for consumers with the brand, adverse events. All these things are tied to reputational risk. Getting violations are tied to reputational risk. Maybe not all consumers will know or see that you're getting a compliance violation. It just depends if consumers are really even tracking that piece of your business. But the cannabis industry is. There's lots of people who are tracking who's getting violations. And so you also have your reputational risk with your colleagues and your partners and your collaboration and those relationships inside the cannabis industry, on top of the relationships that you guys have outside of the cannabis industry with just your consumer base. And so there's all types of risk in the cannabis industry. Investors and buyers that are going to be looking at your business, these are things that matter to them. They really want to buy a business that's going to be profitable, be able to grow and expand, that's going to be able to generate money. Nobody wants to buy a business that's failing and they're sinking in debt. We're not talking about buying a distressed asset. We're talking about how you can make your business very attractive to a buyer or an investor with compliance excellence. This is for people who say, how can I go the extra mile? What else can I do? How can I make my business more attractive? How can I attract investors for my next step, for those who want to keep growing and expanding? I'm always looking for those systems that are consistently producing these compliant outcomes and shrinking the circle of risk. Can employees explain the SOP to me? And I'm going to go, sorry, on a little rant here. a little bit of a thing here, because a lot of times I find, and I'm not going to lump everyone into one category, the cannabis industry is a mixed bag of lots of different things. Some people are in this camp of taking responsibility, in the camp of taking accountability serious. And there's other people that are in the camp of being overwhelmed and they miss things. And that's why compliance and systems and standards are important. Having compliance officers and audits and people like me supporting businesses or just doing this podcast so people can listen to try to expand their knowledge when it comes to compliance. All these things play important roles in the cannabis industry. But asking yourself, can your employees explain an SOP is a very important question. It could be a question that an investor or a potential buyer could be asking, or maybe an investor, let's just say maybe more of an investor, because a buyer could come in and just outright buy the company and not bring the staff with them, or maybe they will. But these are things to think about. A lot of times I feel employees get trained on the SOPs initially when the business opens, or if they get hired for onboarding, and then it just falls through and nobody's talking about the SOPs anymore and they're not getting updated, or they might get updated, or there's a little bit of version control, but then it's not getting communicated. to the staff? Can they really understand and explain the SOP? Is inventory really reconciled every day? I would say it could be 50% of the companies out there actually really reconciling their inventory every day. I would say inventory, seed-to-sale tracking, metric, anything around inventory in general is the top violations and fines, compliance, inefficiencies that happen across the United States. Is training documented? I find that this is 50-50. Half the people I encounter do a great job at this, and the other half I encounter, their employee training tracking systems are outdated. Are there deviations that are being investigated? Important information to know. And can management demonstrate control over the operations? This is things like supply chain management, supply chain agreements, all the inventory, complete site and document control that's happening in the business. These are all really important. This is really what I like to call operational discipline. And operational discipline really begins with making sure that you have all the right systems in place. Now, let me say this. You can have all the right systems in place, right? You launched, or you're like, oh, I'm feeling excited. I'm feeling pumped. I got all my SOPs. I've got all these systems in place. Everyone's trained. Let's go. We're going to crush it. And then you're crushing it. But what happens is, who's in charge of maintaining it? Who's making sure that all those controls are working? Who's looking for all the gaps? Who's fixing all the issues? Because I will tell you, and this is from myself because I ran and operated vertically integrated dispensaries, basically a grow and a dispensary that I was running and operating for 6 years, and you're buried. You're buried. I didn't even realize this until I started my own business and left running operations. I didn't realize how buried I was and how many fires I was putting out daily, because that's all you're doing, especially if you're the manager or the owner. Everyone's coming to you with all their issues and their problems to solve, and you're constantly having to solve problems and put out fires, and you can't get all the things done that you need to. You sometimes don't have operational discipline because you're so engulfed in solving all these problems. So you really have to keep the maintenance going of these systems and have a strong system in place and have engagement. If you have those things, it is possible. I meet people every day in the cannabis industry and operators and go into these facilities where I'm just in awe of how incredible all their systems are and how they're managing it, and people are fully engaged and they have all their checks and balances. So I know it's a reality. I know it exists. I know people are out there doing it. And it's not just in MSOs. And let me tell you, MSOs, they don't have all their bleep together always at any time. And everyone thinks MSOs are these perfect operations. And those who don't know what the acronym MSO means, this is multi-state operator. They could be in 2 states, 3, 5, 10, 18, 20 states with cannabis operations. Once you're into another state, you're a multi-state operator. You can be in Colorado and in New Mexico and be an MSO. And then you have single state operators, right? And they could have 15 licenses in one state. That's pretty typical here in Colorado. And they can also be overwhelmed. I would like to say that it's really small businesses, medium, mom and pop, single owner, single licensed facilities should really be paying attention to compliance. The old saying back in the day was, us smaller operators, we don't have to worry about being under the microscope because the regulators only care about people who own 10 or more licenses. They really only are going after the big operators. That's just not true. I read through the violations, administrative actions every other morning here. I'm reading through Colorado. I'm looking at New Mexico. I'm looking at Michigan, which is the CRA. They just send it to my email box. It's just every month they send out a report on all the violations and everything that's going on. And most states, they do this now. You can go and read through all the violations and everything that's going on. in that state. I know for a fact that they're going after any type of operator. They're just not targeting large operators. And so as a small business, your compliance burden is different than a large operator. A large operator, an MSO, the cost of compliance is huge, right? That's times 10 licenses or what do they have. As a single facility operator, you still have the same compliance burden, but it's just the cost of one operation. It's not times 10. It's not times 5 because you just have one location. But you still have the burden of having to be in compliance, right? You still have the cost of SOPs and inventory tracking and employees and engaging with compliance people and third-party audits and having your own compliance staff and attorneys. You still have to pay all the fees. And so all that piles on. All that requires operational discipline and attention that it deserves. So the strongest cannabis companies build compliance into every decision they make. I'll say that again. The strongest cannabis companies out there in the industry, whether this is in the United States or globally, for those who are listening from around the world, we have the international market, which I just started working in January, and the same thing goes for them in the international markets. The strongest cannabis companies build compliance into every single decision they make. I probably said that on 10 episodes, at least in my podcast, where every decision is tied to compliance. A best practice that I want to give regarding compliance isn't just about passing inspections. You want to shift your leadership conversations from, are we compliant, to how do we prove that we're compliant? Because there's a difference between proving that you're compliant and just asking, are we compliant? Is there really proof that you're compliant? How can you prove it? Show me your systems. Show me all the things that tell me that you're in compliance without just telling me that you're in compliance. So include compliance metrics alongside sales, production, and financial KPIs during any of your management meetings. It's really important that your team, whether this is the management team, the exec level, like CEO, CFO, there should be communication. The biggest breakdown around compliance that I see is when we have the executive level of the business, like I just mentioned, those titles, versus the management team, the people on the ground running all the operations. Now, this is not always the case for smaller companies. I understand the owners, they're pretty much the CEO, the CFO, the COO, and the manager. They're everything, right? But we do have companies that do have these job roles, and the biggest issue is communication. Are you guys having meetings with the management staff? And then is the management staff having meetings with the people that are under them that they're managing? And so on. What's the communication look like? This is one of the biggest breakdowns I see when companies have a lot of different job roles and then nobody's talking to each other. Treat every inspection as a validation of your systems and not a one-time event. Managers need to own compliance within their teams rather than relying on one compliance officer. It's just not a one-person job. Build accountability into every single position and not just compliance-related roles. I see this a lot where they leave employees out of the discussion, right? They leave them out. They don't include them. You got to give employees the responsibility and the breadth of the seriousness of compliance. Employees are the gatekeepers of compliance. Sometimes they're the last eyes on things before that package goes out. On the manufacturing side, all those packagers out there that are weighing out grams or running the automation machines or hand rolling joints and pre-rolls and packaging things, they're the last to see. If you don't have a QA/QC quality control person running around looking at everything and you're manufacturing and you're a small business and it's really just like one person, that means everyone's eyes are on everything. So you have to build compliance into everything in the business. So years ago, cannabis businesses could survive with spreadsheets and there might be some people laughing, all the spreadsheet people. I love a good spreadsheet, trust me. Handwritten logs, and bless these people, but I remember 11 years ago having to review handwritten SOPs. No joke. It was definitely the Wild West days. So handwritten logs and people who simply just knew how things worked and we just didn't have to write anything down. It's all up in here, and what do I need to write it down for? That environment is disappearing. That's just not going to fly anymore. The cannabis industry is heading towards modernization. I just recently told somebody I have to modernize my website. I have to get up to speed to where the industry is going just with my website. I have to do this. I have to continually modernize how I do things, how I engage with customers, how I do trainings. The industry is changing. Things are moving faster. And the same goes for cannabis operators. Just like I have to adapt, you guys have to adapt. If not, you're going to get left behind. I'll get left behind. So it's really keeping yourself in touch with how the industry is changing and paying attention. I meet people all the time that have no idea what's going on in the entire cannabis industry. They're just in their own bubble, in their own state, and they have no idea that people are experiencing the same violations that they're experiencing, or that the number one violation in the country has to do with inventory. Some people don't even understand or comprehend what is going on at all in any of these other states. It's really not this is just my experience, but we're all experiencing the same things over and over again, but just in different phases, right? We're in different phases across the country because we have some markets coming on, some mature markets. We have markets that are only 2 to 3 years old. But I'm telling you, we all have so much in common across the United States because we've all either experienced it, or you're about to experience it, or you're experiencing it right now. And that's pretty much the truth. The cost of good enough, that environment is disappearing. Today's operators, they are facing an increasing regulatory expectations, more sophisticated buyers. The customers are smart. The consumers are smart now. They're educated. They know better. Stronger banking relationships and more institutional interest than ever before. The light is shining bright on the cannabis industry, and everyone is going to start looking under every nook and cranny that's going on in this industry. It is beginning to enter the mainstream arena. I want to talk about what's important for buyers and investors when due diligence begins. So for all those that might not understand, due diligence is a process that an investor or a buyer, even banking institutions do due diligence. If you think about it, when you're getting hired by an employer, they do due diligence. They interview you, they have questions, they might have different processes you have to go through. They also might check your references. The same goes for investors. They want to review all your assets. They're going to be reviewing all your financial records, your tax records. They're going to be auditing your whole entire cannabis operation. They're going to be looking at your seed to sale system and tracking and your sales and what you're selling wholesale for. They're going to be looking at every little gear that runs the business. And that's, to me, what due diligence is. Just like you can have somebody come in and do a due diligence audit as part of the valuation. They're going to look at all your financial information, but then having a third party audit and look over everything so you can score the health of the business. You have to score people's compliance health of the business. If you have excellent compliance health and you have all these systems in place and you've just spent this extra money to go the extra mile, your business is going to be worth more money. I'll give an example for those who ever owned a home or bought a home or watched those shows on TV where they go and they flip houses. For example, you update your kitchen. You're going to increase the value of your home. You could increase the value of your home by $100,000, depending on what market is. You increase the value, you're going to have more interested buyers because you added a modern kitchen. That's important to me. I don't want to spend the money to try to update a kitchen. So that's going to be important to buyers or investors. It's the same thing for cannabis. all this money that you're spending to do all these things and these compliance programs and these systems and this compliance health and compliance excellence, it's just investing. It's investing in your business. It's just like investing in the house that I was telling you about. It's the same thing. It's going to increase the value of your business. When due diligence begins, buyers just don't evaluate your revenue. They evaluate your risk. I talk about the circle of risk all the time. They look for missing documentation. They look if you have compliance violations. They're looking at all your documents, all your SOPs. Do you have outdated SOPs? Do you have a lot of turnover in your business with employees? Incomplete employee training? Are there a lot of corrective actions that were never closed or dealt with? Do you have a lot of unemployment going on? They're going to be looking at all your issues in your business. So every one of those creates uncertainty, and uncertainty costs money, let me tell you. I've seen it before. Companies spend weeks and weeks or even months trying to recreate records they should have been maintaining all along. I know one thing, it's better to spend it up front because you're still going to have to spend this, and it's going to probably cost you more on the back end. And trying to save a buck, trying to cut corners. I've been doing this for 17 years. I've been watching people cut corners for 17 years. I've been watching people try to save money for 17 years or not spend the money, to watch them having to spend double or triple the amount that they could have saved if they just did it right out of the gate. But everyone's human, and it's human nature. Money drives decisions. Compliance doesn't always drive people's choices. Money drives people's choices. And sometimes the choice around money is more important than the choice around compliance. And that's what I see all the time in the cannabis industry. Some best practices to take with you. You want to capture records in real time. And this is regarding the cost of good enough. So you want to capture records in real time instead of trying to recreate them later. You want to conduct routine internal audits throughout the year, not just before inspections. A lot of these states are moving to surprise inspections where they're not scheduling them anymore. So you really don't know where they're coming in. You might know when the fire department's coming in. You might know when some of these regulators are coming in. But a lot of times, state and local municipalities, they're not scheduling them anymore. It's all about the surprise. You want to have audits. You should be auditing yourself weekly. There's lots of different checklists that you have, but there should be some routine checklists that you have. I would definitely recommend engaging with a third-party auditor, someone like myself, or there's lots of other companies out there that do it. I know the clients that work with me that do these twice-a-year audits, it's a lifesaver. It's a lifesaver because things fall through the cracks. And employees miss things, compliance officers miss things. And so it's just really important. Internal audits, have that third-party audit support. You want to review inventory reconciliation daily. Go listen to my seed to sale tracking episode I did on metric. I dive completely into all the things that people aren't doing correctly in metric. So check that episode out because I can't really dive into it on this episode. But you want to review inventory reconciliation. You want to keep employee training records current and accessible, document corrective actions, and verify that they've been completed. So you want to have these processes in place. And you want to schedule monthly SOP reviews with managers. Are you updating your version controls? They're nailing people for not having the version controls. So the best time to prepare for an inspection is every day, and not the week before it happens. The next section I want to talk about is what a compliance culture looks like. People often assume compliance belongs to one person, the compliance manager. And do I ever know that as somebody who once was a compliance manager? I wore every hat in the business in these cannabis operations. And so every employee touches compliance. Cultivation teams, manufacturing, people working on inventory, sales, transportation, and management. Everyone contributes to the regulatory successes or failures. Everyone. And that's why it's important that every role have compliance woven into it and people are trained properly. A compliance-first culture means every employee understands that documentation is part of the job and it's just not something extra. It's not in my job description. Nobody ever told me that I had to do stuff like that. That's why you have to prepare your employees for everything. So they're not sitting around and saying, that's not in my job description, I'm not going to do that. If you have staff that are saying that, then you don't have the right staff. Then you don't have a team player. I've worked with people that have said that, that's not my job description, or I've been a manager and had an employee snap back at me and say, that's not my job. You don't want to hire people like that. You want to hire everybody who's willing to be a team player at all times. Those are the people you want to have on staff. So a compliance-first culture means everyone understands about compliance and how it's in every decision that they make, that you make when training them and supporting them and helping them, how they interact with customers, everything, how they're working in the metric system. Like I said, data entry in the inventory system, inventory tracking, management, number one violation in the United States for cannabis operators. You want to make sure that inventory is verified as it's moved. You want to make sure that cleaning logs are completed when cleaning happens. I can't tell you how many times I come through and I see people's logs and they don't fill them out correctly, or the visitor log, people sign in but they never sign out, or people walk off with the visitor badge. People aren't filling out the waste logs properly. There has to be accountability. You cannot be lazy, because laziness equals violations, basically. Laziness leads to a lot of things, but you have lazy employees, everything's going to be lazy. That's going to be reflected in your business, and everyone's going to treat your business that way. You want to make sure that training is documented immediately, that issues are reported early. You want to create an environment where if employees spot something, have them come say something. It's just so important. You're in the regulated cannabis industry. Regulated, meaning it's yours to lose. You got the license. Now it's yours to lose. It's all on you now. It's about keeping it in compliance and having a successful, thriving business. You want to make sure that corrections are tracked immediately. Any corrective actions, whether this is with a staff member, whether a process needs to be fixed, there was a process failure and you have to go fix it and update SOPs and retrain everyone. There's lots of things for corrective actions. Maybe somebody accepted a cracked ID. Maybe somebody let a fake ID get through the system and someone from underage came in, or you got busted in a sting operation with the police and they did a compliance check on how you're checking IDs. There's lots of things. So compliance becomes part of the workflow instead of something that gets done at the end of the week, end of the month, end of the year. So best practices is you want to incorporate compliance into every new hire orientation. It's a must. You want to hold short monthly compliance refreshers instead of relying on an annual training. At a minimum, employees should have training engagements quarterly. And I know, like dispensaries, there's lots of great platforms out there like Learn Brands and Sparkplug, and I'm probably leaving out a couple other ones where bud tenders can watch all this micro learning, but they're really getting learning on products. I'm talking about compliance. I'm talking about internal training on systems and SOPs and processes and handbooks and policies and communication and how things are done in the business. I love that you can get all that brand training from the vendors and these platforms. I'm talking about the nuts and bolts of the business. That's really what I want to see a step up and better call to action for operators with employees. These monthly compliance refreshers, before we would open the dispensary, I would do just like a 10-minute check-in with staff. We would all gather in a group for the opening shift. We talk about our specials today, what goals we wanted to reach as a team, what things that we need to work on from the previous shift that we were seeing happening. That should be daily with your team. Keep the team engaged and involved in the business. You want to teach employees the reason behind SOPs instead of asking them to simply memorize procedures. Why is it that you're making me do this? Why do I have to do this step? The step seems ridiculous. I don't understand it. This makes no sense. And sometimes they feel that way because nobody talked to them about the compliance piece or the regulation. Sometimes a lot of the steps in an SOP are directly connected to a rule reference. And a lot of times people don't know the story or the information to why things happen or why they are the way they are and why you can't do the things that you do where it's logical. At the end of the day, we're in the regulated cannabis industry, just like a pharmacy. When you go to a pharmacy and they attach the description of the drug and adverse reactions, things that you can experience when you pick up your prescription drugs, nobody's up in arms and going, why is this stupid piece of paper on here? Gosh, why are they burdening us with all these rules and regulations? They're used to being regulated. That's just part of having a pharmacy. That's just what they have to do to run a regulated pharmacy. So I want you to look at cannabis as the same way. This is what you have to do to be in the regulated cannabis industry. And I will say it's only going to get harder, just for a wake-up call. With the rescheduling of cannabis, for those that think it's going to get easier, it's really not. It's going to get harder. And if we ever deschedule and become federally legal, and then we have interstate commerce and all these things, and then we can do international trade globally, and interstate commerce across the United States, you're going to be held to a federal standard. If you think following state rules and regulations is overwhelming, wait till the federal government gets involved. It's going to be very overwhelming. You want to create an environment where every employee feels comfortable with compliance, that they feel comfortable reporting mistakes or mishaps or something that they spotted. You want employees to recognize, to be able to identify compliance issues before they become violations. It's just really important to have people trained. Compliance is everyone's responsibility. It's not just the compliance departments. So the next piece I want to talk about is technology should reduce risk. Another major shift we're seeing is the move away from these disconnected systems. Boy, oh boy. It's really crazy how disconnected a lot of these systems are in the cannabis industry. We're so siloed in the market and by state. We're siloed in our operations. We're just siloed with all these tech stacks and people. They have too many things, too many software platforms that all do the same thing. And so technology, we're seeing everything move away from all these disconnected systems that don't make sense. Too many businesses still operate using spreadsheets, alongside seed-to-sale software, these paper logs, multiple databases that don't communicate to each other. It's really important that everyone tries to get a tech stack that makes sense, right? That you're not having things that overlap or both doing the same thing. It gets really expensive. So technology should simplify compliance and definitely not complicated. Integrated systems provide better visibility, stronger accountability, and faster decision-making. More importantly, they create traceability. Tracking is really important. That's what regulators want. That's what auditors want. And that's exactly what investors or potential buyers they're looking for. They want to come in and have systems in place, right? They don't want to come in and have it be a fixer-upper. If it's a fixer-upper, you're going to get less for your business. If it's not a fixer-upper and maybe your systems are outshining the systems that they already have in place and they're like, holy cow, we want to take what these guys are doing here. They're doing an incredible job. Like, we need to improve our systems just by what they're doing. That's what you want to work towards. So some best practices: integrate your seed-to-sale tracking software with other operational systems when it's available. You want to digitize employee training, document control, and quality records. QMS, all the way. Quality management systems software. You can manage all your document controls, all your training, all your audits, all your information, everything in one place. You want to standardize your naming conventions and document version control 100%. Naming conventions are a mess. I could just do a whole entire episode on naming conventions in the cannabis industry. It's really outrageous. The naming conventions are out of control out there. You want to regularly review user permissions to ensure proper system access, especially with everything, of course, website, social media, your POS systems, but especially the seed to sale tracking system. This is where employee theft comes in, where the owners didn't set up their metric account correctly and employees had access where they could go in and adjust packages because they were stealing from that company. So you want to have really good administrative and permission controls, even if you're using Google Docs. You want to control what employees have access to. You also want to back up critical compliance records according to your document retention policy. I was reading today online on LinkedIn, the third violation in California was document management and record retention. And I believe it. So good technology supports compliance, but technology cannot replace strong processes. Meaning, you guys can use AI out there, but AI can't replace people. You can use AI as a tool, as part of developing systems, but you still need strong processes in place and you need humans involved in these processes. Why investors and or buyers care about compliance? When buyers evaluate a cannabis company, they're evaluating more than your revenue. Like I mentioned before, they're assessing the operational risk. Investing is risk. There's risk involved. They're trying to assess all the risk in their business. Investors know the cannabis industry is risky. Look at all these large companies that go into receivership or these MSOs that are going out of business or bankrupt. I mean, all these issues going on where they owe investors $9 million or millions and millions of dollars. Those investors knew there was a risk that they could lose that money, right? And more investors are getting smarter. For example, a lot of investors now won't give anyone money until they have the license in the hand. They won't supply capital to the person applying for the license at all. They might invest once that person wins the license and they'll come in and invest. Another piece too is a lot of times people aren't able to get access to capital or investment because even if they have the license, they're pre-revenue and they don't want to invest because there's no financial records. There's nothing to look at. All you have is pre-revenue burn. Burn, baby, burn. That's the name of the game in the cannabis industry. Ask everybody who's an operator about their pre-revenue burn. It's sickening. It's sickening, right? And that's why a lot of times people won't invest the money in the beginning because you have nothing to show for it. You have no capital. And that's why it's a struggle to get capital or get access to money in the cannabis industry, among all the other issues around banking and loans and all that stuff. But so assessing the operational risk, remember the circle of risk. It's all about the circle of risk. And if you're ever planning to raise capital or sell your business, you have to remember that buyers aren't purchasing your past. They're investing in your future or their own future. So every compliance issue represents future risk. What happened in the past doesn't matter. It's all about now and the future. So every compliance issue represents future risk. Here are some questions. Can this business continue operating successfully? Will hidden problems appear after closing? Could regulators impose penalties? Are there existing penalties and violations that you didn't even know about? Will inventory records hold up? Will the market survive? What about price compression? I've seen markets now where price compression is happening within the first year, and it takes these operators 1 to 2 years to get open, depending on the license and the size. Like here in Colorado, depending on the license type, dispensaries can get open within the year. Consumption lounges, it's taken 2 to 3 years here in Colorado to get open. So imagine the burn associated with that risk. But when it takes you 2 to 3 years to get open, what is everything worth, right? Does the price per pound drop in that market? What's the price compression? You have issues depending on if you're a mature market or an emerging market. It's already here. We've been in it. The bottom already fell out here in Colorado. It already fell out in Oregon. It already crashed. It's already hit the bottom in New Mexico and Michigan. But these new markets, New Jersey hasn't hit the bottom. Minnesota hasn't hit the bottom, but they will. It happens to every single market. You cannot stop it. It's just the natural progression of the market coming online. The more people that get open, there's going to be the race to the bottom. You have pricing compression, price competition, and you have to differentiate yourself and you have to be the company. And I've had a lot of operators come on my podcast that say, we didn't lower our price and they survived the race to the bottom. You can be that operator that does survive that race to the bottom. You should be asking yourself, will the inventory records hold up? And are quality systems reliable? Do they even have quality systems? So strong compliance programs answer those questions before they're even asked. They demonstrate operational maturity. And that's where the market's at. Colorado, operational maturity. And if you do not have operational maturity in the Colorado market and you've been operating a while here, you're never going to have operational maturity. That automatically tells me that you're never going to get out of the cave, like I like to call it, the cave of, I'm never going to change my ways. I'm not going to adapt. I'm just going to do the same thing I've been doing for the last 10 years in the mature market. That's a surefire way of not surviving and going out of business in a mature market. So they demonstrate this operational maturity that I'm talking about. And that's incredibly valuable. And that really matters to investors and people looking to buy a cannabis business. So some best practices is maintain and organize those historical records and data, not just current documentation. You want to perform annual operational and compliance assessments using an independent third-party auditor like I talked about. You want to track corrective actions and verify that they are remaining effective over time. You want to maintain those current SOPs with document revision histories, organize documentation as through due diligence that could begin tomorrow. You want to conduct mock due diligence reviews before seeking investors and buyers. That's a really good one. That's really important to go through some practice runs of these due diligence audits. And because a lot of times an investor or a buyer, they'll send somebody that they hire as a third-party auditor. You could have someone like me come in and audit your business and say, here's our report. But they'll say, we don't know Jenny and you hired her and maybe she really liked you and she didn't include everything in here. We're going to hire somebody that you guys do not know and they're going to come in and do an audit for us and tell us everything that we need to look at. It could end up that way as well. You want to prepare for the future. And that's with federal standards. And I can't get into a deep discussion about it today, but I did mention the rescheduling of medical cannabis, the future of descheduling, the future of rescheduling adult use. We don't know what that looks like. But when you prepare for the future, it could look something like this. With federal standards, we have OSHA, GMP, good manufacturing practices. And if you want to do business overseas, you have to be EU GMP certified in order to do import and exporting. Even here in the United States, let's say we can do interstate commerce, you're going to have to be GMP certified to export and import into all these states across the United States. QMS, you're going to have quality management systems. Missouri is a great state to look at. They did a great job. They have quality management systems that are written into the rules and regulations. All operators are required to have a QMS program. You have ISO 9001, which is really just part of quality management systems. It's really about how you're managing your systems. QA/QC, quality assurance, quality control. Some states, they're requiring this. Shoot, I've even seen some countries where they require that you have a QA/QC person full-time on staff for the business and the rules and regulations. FDA compliance is going to be a big deal here in the United States. We already have cannabis operators that are ready for FDA compliance. If you want to play with the big boys, you're going to have to seriously think about FDA compliance, even if you're a one manufacturing facility. Let's say in Colorado, you're a concentrate brand, and now we have interstate commerce, and you want to ship your brand all across the United States. FDA compliance. Doesn't matter how big or small you are. Doesn't matter how many states, if you're in 20 or 1. All these things matter. All these standards matter. We also have GACP, for those who don't know what that is. GACP is Good Agricultural and Collection Practices. This is for cultivation facility. There are a lot of countries in the international market that require you to have GACP practices in place, as well as here in the United States. This is going to be important for anyone who wants to do interstate commerce in the future here in the U.S. market is GACP. The future in the United States is going to be interstate commerce. That's the future, where you can just have one distribution company. And I'm going to say this, I'm going to drop this right here, right now. Missouri is going to be the hot spot because Missouri is in the middle of the United States. It's going to be the hot spot for interstate commerce across the country. Now, there are going to be people who are going to be shipping from Oregon because you can't beat California or South Oregon cannabis grown over there and the green belt, they call it, the Emerald Triangle. And certainly Colorado, we do not have California cannabis here in Colorado. I will say, Colorado, we have some of the best concentrate brands in the entire United States are all born here in Colorado. And so those concentrate brands, they're going to capitalize on shipping their product all across the United States. Yeah, so the takeaway would be companies that can quickly demonstrate this operational control, maturity, often experience smoother financing, partnership, and acquisition discussions. And once again, the future, preparing for the future, it's so important right now. And so I'm going to wrap up and leave you with a couple other items to think about. So the cannabis industry is evolving. It's over. 2010 is over. Even 2025, we're just not the same anymore. And by the time we get to 2027, this whole game is going to change. Everything's in motion right now. It's in action, and you cannot stop the train. Yeah, I think some states are going to try to repeal cannabis or maybe the adult use, but medical cannabis, it's full steam ahead. And it's going to be up to the states, and the industry is 100% changing. So operators who thrive over the next decade will be the ones who build businesses that are organized, disciplined, transparent, and prepared. Compliance isn't something that you do because the regulators tell you to or the rules tell you to. It's something that you do because it makes your business stronger. It improves operations. It protects your reputation, reputational risk with consumers, and it builds trust. I attended a webinar recently. I'm sorry, I can't remember the name. And what stuck out to me the most, and they were talking about the international supply chain market was focused on global cannabis. And I can't remember a specific country, but I think what stood out to me the most, they talked about that a lot of the consumers are losing trust with brands because product is getting exported into some of these international countries that are contaminated. They're not passing testing and all these things, and it's affecting the consumers, and they're losing trust. It's reputational risk that I talked about. Same thing happens here in America. It's the same thing. Recalls, adverse events, inconsistency, the price going up and down. It's all about high THC and cheap weed. I'm not for that. That's not the consumer that I am. I much rather have quality. than cheap weed and high THC. And that's an old model. That model is dying on the vine. Yes, there will be people who need cheap weed because they're on a budget. There's people who buy Miller Lite, Coors Light, cheap beer, cheap everything, cheap food. There's always going to be people who buy cheap everything because they're on fixed incomes, and that's how things are dictated by how much money or income that they're making. But there's a huge amount of consumers who want to spend more, who want a higher quality, who have the money to buy higher quality products. So trust is really important with your vendors, with consumers, with the regulators, all of it. It really matters when you're entering into this market or expanding or trying to set up your business to have additional value to get more out of it when you're trying to sell it or get investment. I just want to thank everyone for tuning in today. Hopefully this is a helpful topic. I just want to provide as much context as I can for small to medium-sized operators because I know you don't have as much support out there as, let's say, an MSO. My goal has always been to provide a place that operators or people wanting to enter the market for the first time could go and gain knowledge and get context and not have to make all the same mistakes that I've seen people make 1,000 times for the last 17 years in the cannabis industry. So thanks again for listening. And for those who stream the podcast, it will be available on Apple and Spotify or wherever you like to listen. I also have a video podcast on my YouTube channel. It is at Under the Microscope with Jenny. Please go to the channel, subscribe. That would be really helpful. Share with your friends. Please share my podcast. It gets it out there so everybody could get access to the information and the content. I hope everyone has a great week, and we'll see you on the next episode.